You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 16th of September 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Briefing, in association with Addis. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Tom Edwards. Coming up on today's programme, President Trump and Prime Minister Starmer will meet this week as Trump enjoys his second state visit to the UK. What will be on the agenda at Windsor today and throughout the week? Our foreign editor, Alexis Self, is here. Lex, what are you expecting?
Good television and gold carriage wheels.
Oh, intriguing. More from Lex on the way in a moment. The veritable parade of talents on today's show will continue after that with the one and only Nic Monisse, Monocle's design editor, is here. Nic, what have you got for me today?
For you today, Tom Edwards, we have a London Design Festival kicking off. We're going to recap some of the highlights already.
Nic is on the show, as is our fashion director, and we'll keep you across all the latest global headlines. That's today here on The Briefing with me, Tom Edwards. A very warm welcome to this Tuesday edition of The Briefing here on Monocle Radio. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Great to have you on board. Here alongside me in Studio One at Midori House in London is the one and only, mercifully, Alexis Self. Monocle's foreign editor is here. Lex, in our crosshairs today, Donald Trump arrives for his second state visit. I believe he and the First Lady will go to Windsor today. He's obviously going to sit down with Prime Minister Starmer, I think tomorrow or possibly on Thursday. What are you expecting? You mentioned some of the kind of pomp and circumstance. There's some impressive numbers about the amount of soldiers and horses and all the rest of it. But as for real political substance, too much to hope for?
I think, well, if we cast our minds back to when Keir Starmer unfurled the invitation letter from King Charles in the Oval Office a few months ago, it feels like a few years ago, so much has happened since then. I think the idea was that there was still hope that the UK could get favourable treatment from the US and perhaps win Trump round to some of Starmer's, especially foreign policy goals. I think since then we've seen that those pretensions were, very idealistic and haven't come to fruition in the way that Keir Starmer and especially his European allies would have hoped. Obviously, there have been, trade tariffs that the UK has suffered less of than other European countries, but still 10% higher tariffs than existed before that meeting. So I think this is part of cementing, or at least proving to the world as much as to the British, that the UK and the US still enjoy a special relationship, which is much cherished on the British side, at least.
Yeah, perhaps less so from DC. But there are suggestions that, whilst we might not see substantive moves on, policy that would inform next steps for, the Ukraine conflict, or exempting certain other UK trades from tariffs, etc., we might see some announcements, some tentative deals. Do we know what else is up for a discussion between Trump and Starmer?
Well, ahead of the visit, there's this nuclear deal that's been announced that, genuinely does offer something new and will be exciting for UK business. There's a deal that involves Rolls-Royce designing new micro-nuclear reactors, small nuclear reactors, which are seen as the future of, urban energy generation and obviously green as well, or cleaner than fossil fuels. So that's one tangible thing that has happened. Look, if Starmer can distract the media in the UK from his own, chaotic past few weeks in leadership, then that will be seen as a success. And if he can get Trump to perhaps announce, which I think is a big thing that he'll be pushing for, further sanctions on Russia, or perhaps secondary sanctions on countries that import Russian oil and gas, then that will be seen as a massive success, as will 3 days without a major gaffe or trip up on Trump's part.
We'll come to their respective domestic political challenges in just a moment. But just to go back, you mentioned playfully, gilded carriage wheels and all the rest of it. And it's funny you mentioned that first visit when Starmer presented his special letter, and Trump looked kind of like a little bit like a giddy schoolboy. The king writing to me, we know you can operate these levers at that stage. Yeah, Starmer, the domestic picture was perhaps a little rosier. You're reading sources even from within government and from within Whitehall saying the focus is, as you said about TV, the focus is on the optics. We know that resonates with Trump. To what degree is the British public going to swallow that, though, and buy it in the face of those problems that Starmer's facing? He's lost Angela Rayner. He's had the Mandelson appointment, which obviously was, one imagines, there because he was going to ameliorate and help manage the relationship personally with Trump. He's got a lot of problems despite his huge majority. Are people going to drink up the giddy optimism around the optics, or is the British public a little more savvy than that?
This is much debated, and I often have this conversation with my friends and colleagues, whether the UK public likes Trump or how much of a political liability cozying up to him is for the UK leader. Most polls suggest that the British public overwhelmingly dislike Trump and that actually that won't play well with them. It's interesting to contrast the two leaders and, as you said, their domestic fortunes at the moment. It's difficult to name a Western, especially leader at the moment, who isn't presiding over a highly polarised and chaotic electorate and domestic political system. But the difference between Trump and Starmer is Trump seems to thrive on the chaos and indeed stokes it, and it seems to be a large part of his political persona and his tactic. Whereas Starmer seems completely cast adrift on the chaos and is constantly making the wrong decision and then backtracking, and so I think that Trump arrives here in both similar and very different circumstances to his host. And as I said, anything that projects an idea or a semblance of transatlantic unity, and I think the UK very much sees itself as representing Europe and European interests more so than ever when a UK leader is meeting a US one. So if Starmer can get Trump to a bit more over to his perspective on Ukraine especially, and avoid any awkward live in-person mistakes or gaffes by the US president, then that will be seen as a resounding success.
There's a wry smile, listeners, on Lex's face, which perhaps speaks to his confidence about gaffe avoidance. Very briefly, Lex, soon a new issue of Monocle on newsstands, and we're lucky we get a little bit of a preview glimpse of the edition. It looks great. To that point about the projection outward of national values, big up the nice piece that you've done. You were in Oman. This is going to be on newsstands, I think, next week. People will, and our subscribers will be receiving their copies. But just quickly tell us what they've got to look forward to about that piece. There's some great writing and some beautiful pictures as well.
Yeah, I had the distinct pleasure and honour of travelling to Muscat, the capital of Oman. It's a very interesting country, Oman, because it's in the Gulf. It's an oil-rich country, and yet it's eschewed the rapid development and glitz and glam of other Gulf countries, especially Qatar and the UAE and now Saudi Arabia, and it's pursued a very slow and kind of pragmatic development, and lots of this can be seen actually through the physical nature of the country, and especially Muscat, its capital city. It's been development's been restricted. The city still looks much as it did 50, 60, 70 years ago. They're now beginning to change things, relax building regulations as part of a drive to open up to foreign investment and to more tourism. So I travelled there, I met the mayor of Muscat, I met ministers in the government and talked to people about what Oman's development drive might look like. And I think, the photography looks amazing. So, yeah, that was a great piece to report.
Yeah, a cracking read. That'll be in the next issue of Monocle coming out, I think, next week. Lex, good to have your insights. Join us again this week and chart the progress or otherwise of Trump's visit. But great to get your preview today. That was our Lex Self Monocle's foreign editor joining us on the programme. 10 minutes past the hour. Let's cross over and hear from Laura Kramer, who's standing by with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Tom. Israel has launched its long-awaited ground offensive on Gaza City, with reports of the most intense bombardment in the 2 years of war. Israel's defense minister said Gaza is burning. Meanwhile, the United Nations released a report today concluding Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. Peru has received approval for the potential acquisition of 12 F-16 fighter jets in a package valued at almost $3.5 billion. It comes as the South American nation seeks to modernize its aging tactical aircraft fleet and bolster its defense capabilities. And the board of Spain's state broadcaster has voted to withdraw from next year's edition of the Eurovision Song Contest if Israel takes part in the event. This makes Spain the fifth country to do so, following similar moves by the Netherlands, Slovenia, Iceland, and Ireland. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much indeed, Laura. More headlines on the way at the top of the next hour, 1300 here in London. It is nothing short of a delight, though, here on The Briefing, to welcome Natalie Theodosi, Monocle's fashion director, to the programme.
Thank you so much.
Here
what a welcome.
I'm being very, I'm just very excited to share the desk with my colleagues today.
Week.
Exactly. Tell me a little bit. I know we've got a clip to listen to as well. Fashion Week's always interesting. They tend to polarise opinion. Are they relevant? Are they passé? Are they too boring? Are they too experimental? Bring us up to date, Natalie. What's everyone talking about?
So definitely polarizing opinions. And I think this time when it comes to New York, a lot of people for the past few years, especially after COVID, they have been questioning its relevance. And a lot of people just also they had to rethink their budgets. They would always skip New York, start either in London or in Milan and Paris. So a lot of conversation around, is it worth having New York Fashion Week to begin with? And there was a lot of interesting opinion about it this season in particular. I thought that there's actually a wave of new talent and that the excitement is slowly but surely coming back. Some other critics, which I might not agree with, but it's equally interesting to see their views. They're saying that it's just boring. And even like these new wave of brands that are emerging, they're quite minimal, they're more pragmatic. So it's too tasteful, it's not experimental enough. And this is not what we need.
I love too much good taste.
Is there such a thing as too much good taste?
In the modern world. But I like this idea of, I guess, one of the sort of attendant implications of that idea is that if there's too much uniformity of view, of vibe, a bit of a ubiquitousness of the same kind of values, you're catering then to this very narrow demography. And some people are saying, look, those people don't exist. We're kind of got this homogenous look, homogenous kind of styles, but actually there's not a homogenous audience. Actually, it doesn't kind of make sense from a business use case. I mean, that's quite interesting, isn't it?
I think it is, but also fashion people, I think, tend to talk to themselves sometimes and live in their own little bubbles, but they forget that all of us, when we wake up, we're not going to put on the crazy hat and then something really crafty. You want great tailored trousers and good denim. And this wave of brands, so people like names that I'm thinking is Maria McManus, a new denim brand called Ruad. It's brands that they're not this boring, quiet, luxury type of brand. They just do things with a little bit more pragmatism and they serve a customer. They're quite small niche businesses still, but growing fast and resonating with lots of different types of women. So to me, that's a good thing. Maybe showing on a catwalk where you need more creativity and entertainment and spectacle is not the right format. But the fact that they're coming up and they're offering great clothes and addressing the customer and what they need versus kind of the spectacle and just feeding this very niche group of fashion people, it's a good thing.
And to that point about the need for the right voice to look at this business. Monocle on Fashion does that, which we'll come to in just a second. Let's just talk briefly about this idea. You've mentioned a couple of names that have jumped out at you, but this sort of new generation of American houses, I think some that we've talked about before on the radio. And this idea, maybe there was a Eurocentricity a little bit of the design landscape. How's the US reshaping that, if it is?
I think it slowly is. I mean, from in the 80s and the 90s is the Ralph Laurens of the world, Tommy Hilfiger, which are still going. But there is a new generation of houses that are having a big impact globally. So I'm thinking of people like The Row, which is run by Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen. Tom Brown, he shows in Paris now, but he has big presence in New York and makes a lot of his clothes there. Kate is another New York label, again, growing and opening these beautiful stores that are almost also like architecture galleries in New York, Los Angeles, now also Europe. So these are brands that do have that balance of creativity and a bit more pragmatism, and they're doing it a little bit different than their predecessors, that they're really investing in quality and they're more artisanal than the past, where it was just all about commerce in the US and opening as many stores as possible, growing, expanding, that kind of American dream that we all know no longer works. So there is, I think, houses that they've taken investment, they're growing, and they represent this new generation.
And these kinds of businesses, of course, who bring some of the rigor from these big global businesses, but pair it with a slightly more niche, nuanced understanding of the market, are the kinds of brands, of course, that we like to cover on Monocle on Fashion. I know we've got a clip which you can introduce in a second, but that is an interesting pivot change. And there are great stories. Look, we're kind of storytellers at Monocle. We like to talk about brands that are pushing that narrative and that agenda, right?
Exactly. I think we love this idea of seeing what's going on in a city and the movements, and this is what's happening in New York at the moment. You've got these bigger houses that are growing and having a bigger impact, but also this new wave of artisanal brands. They are facing a lot of challenges given tariffs and how expensive it is to produce something in the garment district, but they're making things work. Like we've been speaking on Monocle on Fashion with our correspondent Stella Roos, who was just saying how people are banding together, things feel quite scrappy, even models doing their own makeup and just making a party out of the fashion shows. So it's the kind of stories you can expect to hear on Monocle on Fashion.
Should we have a quick listen? I think we've got a bit of tape to play. Let's have a listen.
Of course, there's always the Ralph Lauren and there's the Calvin Klein, but the most exciting shows, I think, in New York have always been the sort of guerrilla style shows. So this week, for example, Rachel Comey, she kicked off the week on Wednesday with this. She just staged the fashion show in an alley, basically behind her studio, and all the guests were sitting on mismatched chairs, and the models were doing their makeup themselves. And of course, this is partly a recognition of that the industry here is definitely facing some headwinds with the tariffs and with the sort of insecurity in online retailers. But it was also just great. Everyone loved it, and everyone had an amazing time, and she showed a super strong collection.
That was Stella Roos, live from New York. She's been spending the week going to all sorts of different shows from us and giving us the insider take on Monocle on Fashion. And the new episode has already been out last night, and you can listen to it on Monocle Radio.
Get across it, people. Listen at monocle.com, as Natalie advises, or via Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your audio. Natalie, great to chat with you.
Thank
Good
you.
programme this week. That's Monocle's fashion director, Natalie Theodosi, joining us here on The Briefing. You are back with the briefing on Monocle Radio. Meet Tom Edwards in the chair here in Studio 1 of Midori House, ticking towards 20 minutes past midday in London. But lo, who has joined me around the table. It's Nic Monisse.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to think I'm your most handsome colleague, so what a treat for you.
I'm just hearing, Nic. No, you're currently somewhere in the relegation zone.
Damn it.
Nic Monisse is Monocle's design editor, of course, and as such, the perfect person to talk a little bit about London Design Festival. Grace Charlton was telling us a bit about that actually on the show just yesterday. We had some awards last night. I think you both went along. Tell us what's been happening.
So she was doing the setup, and I am giving you the wrap from the awards. So the London Design Awards always take place during the London Design Festival, as you would expect. I think it's a perfect marriage of the two. But it's quite a nice concept. They only have 4 awards each year. They give out the London Design Medal, which is recognising a current practitioner. This year, that's Michael Anastasiades. They usually give out, or they do give out, a Design Innovation Award. That was Sinead Burke, an amazing advocate for designing for people with disabilities, people that are maybe typically forgotten in the design conversation. Ryo Kobayashi won the Emerging Talent Award. He's been on Monocle a heap of times. We have an eye for talent. And then Norman Foster picked up the Lifetime Achievement Award. But I think what made it a particularly special evening, that this wasn't, it didn't feel like it was a lot of kind of backpacking, not backpacking.
He's off backpacking, people. Breaking news.
The patting of backs wasn't necessarily taking place. It was really, I guess, a moment of critical reflection on how we can do things better, which it kind of surprised me a little bit, because these are people being recognised for their bodies of work, but rather than, I guess, basking in that potential glory, because it is quite a nice medal you get. It's like this kind of 20 centimetre diameter disc designed by Barbara Osgoby. But both Norman and Sinead in particular, when they took the stand, or they took the dais to accept their awards, they really kind of pushed the crowd. Look, it was an industry crowd, it was a design bubble, but they really pushed the crowd to, I guess, reflect on their work and actively reflect on their approach to work. I mean, Sinead was particularly good. She was talking about designers need to think about who isn't included in their thought process. So, can you put in a ramp that isn't just tucked off to the side for somebody in a wheelchair, but actually is part of a grand entrance to a building? Can you integrate kind of steps into it? Those sorts of considerations that maybe are a little bit more difficult, but she was really encouraging people not to shortcut them, and ultimately that will lead to a better outcome. And it was kind of echoed inadvertently by Norman Foster, who in his speech, he was talking about what keeps him going. I mean, he's 90 years old this year, and he said he still thinks like a student. So and I've written these down because I thought this was lovely. He says to be curious, dare to challenge, continue to question, listen, don't be afraid of failure, take risks, and above all, remain humble. And I thought that was quite beautiful and a really nice way to practice.
And it's incredible when a veteran like that, as you said, with a potentially unrivaled body of work spanning 6-7 decades, can say, I don't have all the answers, and I'm still. And he kept saying, we know he's still working, and he's still working, and he's still working at adhering to those principles, which is pretty commendable.
100%. And I think what's even, I was lucky enough to interview him earlier this year. I think our colleague Carlotta also interviewed him recently. He's active, he's travelling, he's meeting people, he's wanting to be in the discussion. Last night he literally jumped onto stage. He skipped the stairs and just jumped onto the stage. Quite impressive. I don't think your knees could do that right now.
Thanks for that, Nic. I'm trying to keep myself in reasonable shape.
Well, I mean, other than the knees, you're looking excellent.
Okay, we've got that on the record. That's Monocle's Nic Monisse with the big stories and a faint scattering of the utterly ridiculous to keep you across this Tuesday here on Monocle Radio. That's all we have, mercifully, on this edition of The Briefing, which was produced by Anita Riotta. Our researcher was Daniela Braw-Smith. Our studio manager was Lily Austin. My thanks to them, one and all. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow, noon in London. But that's your lot for Tuesday's Briefing. I'm Tom Edwards. Thanks for listening.